We are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by. We'll return to our program shortly.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to operating difficulties, there's been an interruption.
We are constantly bathed in a vast sea of external stimuli in the form of light, sound, odors, touch, and tastes. These stimuli are converted into nerve impulses, which are carried by nerve fibers to the spinal cord and brain. Light and heat, sounds, odors, and touch stimuli would never be perceived by an individual, and he would be isolated completely from his environment. Were it not for the sense receptors located in the head and in the body and limbs. In addition to external sense receptors, we have internal sense receptors as well. Thus, in the stomach, we are aware of the sensations of hot and cold. In the intestines, we are aware of pressure and of pain. Our muscles have receptors responding to stretching and tension. Without these internal sense receptors, we would have no way of getting information about the state of our inner organs. Receptors for temperature, pain, touch, and pressure are found scattered all over in the body. Because of their wide distribution, they are known as the general sense receptors. Some are concentrated in the deeper skin layers. Others in the joints, muscles, and viscera. In a cross-section of the skin layers, receptors for heat are found, along with receptors for cold. The presence of heat gives rise to a nerve impulse, as does the presence of cold. In a similar manner, objects lightly touching the outer surface of the skin will set off nerve impulses in the touch receptor, as will the touching or bending of a hair. Bending the arm stimulates many pressure receptors located in the muscle tendon and in the capsule surrounding the bony joints. Thus, the brain continually receives data concerning the whereabouts of the body and limbs. We have been considering receptors for temperature, pain, pressure, and touch, receptors of a general nature. In addition to these, however, we also have a number of special sense receptors, all located in specific areas of the head. The first special sense receptor we shall consider is balance or equilibrium. In each side of the skull, there is a set of organs of balance located in the inner ear. Each set consists of 3 semicircular canals filled with fluid which form loops, plus 2 sac-like swellings. At one end, each canal has a small swelling, called the ampulla. Within it is a crest-shaped group of receptors, hair cells embedded in a gelatinous substance. When we change horizontal speed or direction, the hairs are bent accordingly and originate impulses which are sent to the brain. The brain, in turn, sends messages to appropriate muscles, causing compensating body posture. The sac-like portions of the pebble-like particles. When we move up, down, or sideways, these particles stimulate the hair cell receptors. Nerve impulses, thus sent to the brain, keep it informed constantly of our position in space with respect to gravity. Both types of receptors function continuously, keeping us oriented as to our position and movement. Two other special sense receptors are the so-called chemical senses of smell and taste. Let us consider the sense of taste. Most receptors for taste are found in the mucous membranes covering the tongue, but others may be located on the palate, the pharynx, the tonsils, the floor of the mouth, and the underside of the tongue. On the surface of the tongue, receptors for the sensation we call sour are located along the sides. Those for bitter across the back. Salty taste receptors are in the front and along the sides, while those for sweet are concentrated at the very tip of the tongue. Taste buds containing special receptor cells are located in the sides of little pits in the surface and sides of the tongue. Food placed on the tongue will diffuse in the saliva to coat the taste buds and soon reach a concentration causing the origin of a nerve impulse. In reality, many of the sensations we call taste are really due to the sense of smell. High in the nasal cavity on the underside of man's cranium or brain case is a very small patch of specialized epithelium, the olfactory or smell receptor area. Ordinary breathing does not bring much air into close contact with this area. But sniffing brings large amounts of outside air into intimate association with the smell receptor cell area. Smell receptor cells are connected to extensions of the brain coming down into the nasal cavity through tiny holes in the cranium. Molecules of odorous materials dissolve in the fluid covering the smell receptor cells, thereby setting off nerve impulses which the brain interprets as sensations of odor or smell. A fourth special sense is dependent upon pressure changes in waves of air, the sense of hearing. Our hearing apparatus is divided into three parts. An outer ear chamber, a middle ear chamber, and an inner chamber. A hollow tube, the Eustachian canal, leads from the middle ear chamber to the upper part of the throat, the nasopharynx. The eardrum, a flexible membrane, separates the outer and middle ear chambers. Sound waves set the eardrum into vibration. The eardrum is attached to a chain of three tiny bones in the middle ear chamber, the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. This is their size under high magnification compared with the head of an ordinary kitchen match. Mechanical vibrations of the eardrum are magnified some 30 times by the movements of these small bones in the middle ear chamber. The inner chamber of the ear is composed of the three semicircular canals whose function in maintaining body equilibrium we have already considered, and the coiled, bony, snail-like cochlea, which has two openings, the round window and the oval window. The flat base of the stirrup is firmly attached in the oval window. When the stirrup pushes in on the oval window, the round window bulges out. When the oval window moves out, the round window goes in. If we could unroll the cochlea and see its insides, we would find three tapered tubes filled with fluid, two of which come together in a tiny common opening at the very tip. In a circular cross-sectional view of the intact cochlea, we see the middle tube contains a very complex structure. The organ of Corti, which contains several rows of cup-shaped hair cells covered with a roof-like membrane. Vibrations of the stirrup transmitted through the fluid-filled cochlear canals cause corresponding vibrations in the organ of Corti. These vibrations give rise to nerve impulses which are sent to the brain. Here they are interpreted as meaningful sounds or noise. Vision, perhaps our most important special sense, is the one responding to light energy. Light which enters the eye is focused almost entirely by two transparent structures, the cornea and the lens. The rounded cornea lies in front of the iris. The convex lens lies behind the iris. Contrary to popular thought, the lens of the eye does not do all or even most of the focusing of light rays entering the eye. In reality, the cornea does 2/3 of the bending or focusing of light and the lens only 1/3. The lens, however, automatically changes shape to maintain continuous sharpness of the light rays already focused by the cornea. As an object approaches the eye, its image goes out of focus on the back of the eye. By reflex action, a set of circular muscles surrounding the lens contracts, causing the elastic lens to bulge in the middle, shortening the focal length and bringing the image back into sharp focus. When an object moves away from the eye, the circular muscles will relax, the lens flattens out, its focal length increases, and again sharp focus is achieved. Accommodation is the term applied to the ability of the lens to change shape in order to maintain good, sharp vision. The actual light receptors of the eye are found in the innermost layer, the retina. The blind spot exists where blood vessels and nerve fibers leave the eye. The fovea centralis is the area of sharpest and clearest vision. A cross-section of the retina reveals it is composed of 10 layers of tissues. The actual layer of light receptor cells, the rods and cones, are next to the black pigmented layer. In order to cause the origin of a nerve impulse in the rod and cone layer, light entering the eye must actually penetrate the layers of the retina. The impulse then travels back to the inner layer of the retina as it moves toward the blind spot and optic nerve. Moving toward the fovea centralis, we pass the blind spot, which is insensitive to light. The fovea centralis, where the retinal layers are thinned and flattened out, is the area of sharpest and clearest vision. Although it is not yet known how we see color, it is known that the cone cells of the retina are involved in the perception of color. At night, when the moon is hidden and only starlight remains, the rod cells allow us to see shapes and forms in shades of gray. Thus, the human eye is a dual-range instrument, perceiving objects in varying intensities of light, from the blazing sun to the dimmest gleam from the stars. We have seen that we are constantly exposed to various types of physical stimuli which are intercepted by certain receptors and in the form of nervous impulses reach the spinal cord and brain. Some of these receptors are located in the deepest layers of the skin. These and others may also be found in the skeletal joints, muscles, and viscera. Each receptor is usually sensitive to just one type of stimulus. They include temperature, pain, touch, and pressure. They are called the general sense receptors. In addition, we have special sense receptors. These include balance, smell, taste, hearing, and vision. The semicircular canals are involved in balance. The crest-shaped hair cells in the ampulla respond to changes in speed or horizontal direction. And gravity changes are detected by the receptors in the saccule and utricle. Receptors in a small patch of sensory epithelium high in the nasal cavity are responsible for the sense of smell. Taste buds themselves contain receptor cells sensitive to the various substances placed upon them. Sound waves traveling down the outer chamber of the ear impinge upon the eardrum. 3 small bones in the middle chamber change these vibrations into mechanical movement and amplify them. Fluid in the cochlea is set into action by stirrup motion. The organ of Corti responds to this fluid movement and sends nerve impulses indicating sounds or noises to the brain. The eye has a number of transparent fluids and solid structures. 2 of these structures are very important in the focusing of light on the retina. They are the cornea and the lens. The lens does less bending of light than does the cornea. However, accommodation, a reflex involving the muscle surrounding the lenses, changes the shape of the lens and maintains sharp vision. The innermost lining of the eye, the retina, contains a layer of light receptors, the rods and cones. Light must actually pass through most of the retinal tissues to reach the rod and cone layer. The cone cells are involved with color vision and sight in relatively high light intensities. The rods come into use in very dim light intensities and enable us to see shape and form only. Together, the rods and cones provide us with a dual-range light intensity receptor system.
The film you're about to see has no characters, it has no people. It is a film to describe to you and explain visually the effect of cymatic frequencies on texture, structure, water, oil. If you spare a little of your imagination as you watch this film as it runs, you will see many things that answer many questions. You will see living forms, living amoeba, almost animal-like creatures. You will see continents being formed, the Earth itself coming into existence, explosions, eruptions, atomic explosions and bombs. You can see all this and watch it before your eyes, but everything owes its existence solely and completely to sound. Sound is the factor which holds it together. Sound is the basis of form and shape. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. We are told that this is how the worlds began and how creation took shape. If we put that into the modern idiom and say that into the great voids of space came a sound and matter took shape. Please watch carefully.
We can also use different shapes of plate. Here we have a triangular plate with a crystal attached to its underside and produce a sonorous figure. We change to a higher note and see a rather more complicated figure. This more elaborate figure, likewise on a steel plate, is also produced by vibration. The exciting crystal is attached to the upper corner of the plate. We use sand and lycopodium. The lycopodium moves to the center of the fields and takes up circular shapes. The sand forms the lines. Each material has its own special way of behaving. Lycopodium alone, a sonorous figure, transition to a mobile flowing phase, and back again to the figure. The sonorous figures represent stationary waves. But now we can also observe moving waves. Here the sand is flowing in a current. When the wavelengths are short, these currents produce a rotary effect. Areas become defined in which the particles are actually rotating. Now we produce two notes with frequencies which are so related as to cause a beat. The note seems to throb, and by using the method we have chosen, this phenomenon of beat or interference can be rendered visible. The figure sways to and fro. The figure pulsates. The picture has changed completely. Now we are exciting fluids. Under vibration, a layer of turpentine forms a regular lattice work. In vibrating glycerin, we see continuous waves which form the queerest figures. And yet, the extraordinary things we see here are simply and solely the effect of vibration. Here is a sonorous figure shown in a fluid. There are some wave fields where there was nothing before. Where there was previously sand, now there is nothing to be seen. The dynamic phase has become the static phase. Wave fields which make the vibratory process in the plate indirectly visible. Here again, interference can be demonstrated. All these wave fields pulsate. Interference becomes visible.
One moment, please.
Place of Dreams, Reel 1.
I'll never get over it. The fine, pure joy of flying. Back when I was a kid, I dreamed of flying. And now, having flown airplanes for half a lifetime, the dream is still with me. And so what a thrill for me to find in the nation's capital, as a part of the venerable Smithsonian Institution, a remarkable building that was built because people dreamed of flying. A building to celebrate human flight, almost as spacious as the sky itself.
magnificent. Just magnificent. That's the only way to describe this place. Real airplanes strung up like toys, real rockets standing 70 feet tall. What a place. They've captured not only the story of flight, but the excitement of flight. I've known about that excitement since I was 16 when I first soloed. A lot of people may know me as Cliff Robertson, the actor or the director or the writer, but to tell you the truth, the thing I like to do most is fly airplanes. And I bet as we look around here together, the excitement of flight will rub off on you, too. Let's find out. Why is this museum so popular? Why has it become the most popular museum in the world? I think I know why. I think it's because this place inspires as many dreams as it displays. And maybe because there are so many stories in the story of flight. The story of flight is still unfolding, and every item, every artifact is displayed so it tells a part of that story. Take, for instance, these three machines hanging up here. Ranger, Lunar Orbiter, and Surveyor. Each a part of the story of our voyages to the moon. With transmitted photos and robot claws that dug into the surface, they taught us what we had to know. And the climax of that story, two men step onto the surface of the moon. And the surface they're stepping onto, they've got some of that here too. You can actually touch it. A rock from the moon. It's about 4 billion years old, and it feels, well, it feels pretty much like a rock.
Oh, it's so smooth like glass. Oh. That's from the moon? Yeah. That's the moon.
You see it? Touch it. Yeah, that's a piece of moon. Rub it, rub it. See that? That's a piece of moon.
Like the moon rock, there's a bit of wonder to find in everything here. Touching a spacecraft that's been in orbit. Seeing the size of these things up close. Standing beneath a real airplane that was once the hottest thing in the sky.
This is the T-2, an airplane built by a Dutchman named Anthony Fokker.
The Army bought the T-2 in 1922, trying for the first non-stop flight across the country.
They selected Lieutenants Kelly and McCready, who were test pilots.
Kelly and McCready, coast to coast in an incredible 27 hours. Behind the linen-covered fuselage, behind the helmets and goggles, behind the roaring propeller, there have always been people. People who knew fear, but were not afraid. Some are remembered clearly, and some much less so. The lonely chance takers, each with a path into the sky. The museum is filled with their historic achievements, but history can mislead us. Wiley Post's greatest achievement was forgotten. He was remembered for taking off in his famous white monoplane, the Winnie Mae, and flying twice around the world. Each time, he set a new record. But he wouldn't be satisfied until he broke the transcontinental record by taking the Winnie Mae up to an astounding 40,000 feet. Yet, in 1935, there was no technology to keep him alive at that altitude. So Post figured it out and took his design to B.F. Goodrich. And this is what they made for him. Wiley Post's forgotten contribution to the technology of flight, the spacesuit. Technology is a practical solution to a scientific problem. And though the first two suits failed, the third one finally worked. And 30 years later, one of the reasons that Ed White could walk in space was simply that Wiley Post wouldn't give up. This building is here because a lot of people wouldn't give up. Danger, hostile places, hostile critics, repeated failures, still, they kept trying. This spindly-looking device is one of the pivotal inventions in the history of flight. But it took 17 years to get it working right. A young New England scientist named Robert Goddard began in 1909 the research and experiments that would one day lead to the world's first liquid-fueled rocket. His wife's home movie camera documented his many difficulties. But Goddard would not abandon his hopeful view of things. In reporting on one launch, he would write, "It was not a failure. We were simply collecting another valuable piece of negative information."
1967 marked the end of the first decade since Sputnik. It was an eventful year in space, a year when this country's biggest rocket was flown for the first time. A year when the moon was mapped in its entirety, and a year when remarkable color pictures of the Earth were received from a globe-orbiting satellite. These are the highlights. There were 3 successful surveyors this year, helping prepare the way for Americans who would land on the moon. These 3-legged craft hurled 235,000 miles from Earth and sat down gently on the moon. Their job? Photograph large areas of the lunar surface. This the surveyors did, and more. Upon a signal from Earth, an arm on Surveyor 3, with a small shovel attached, extended out to this unknown soil, retrieved a scoopful, and placed it on one of the spacecraft's landing pads. Surveyor's camera then took a look at the moon material, in color. Other instrumentation has chemically sampled the soil. But the surveyors were not alone. 3 picture-taking lunar orbiters gave scientists a different perspective as they circled above the moon. Again, pictures. Pictures from a distance and pictures close up. Pictures revealing the lunar surface in remarkable detail. The kind of detail needed before men land there. Explaining what we've learned from the 2 spacecraft, NASA's Assistant Director for Lunar Flight Programs, Captain Lee Shearer.
There are 3 major accomplishments of the Surveyor and Lunar Orbiter programs. They have demonstrated that we have the technical competence to do a significant exploration of the planets with automated spacecraft. They have shown us that the moon is a complex and scientifically interesting place for further exploration by man. And they have paved the way for that first man landing. This will be accomplished along the equatorial belt of the moon. In this zone, the 8 smoothest sites have been selected from orbiter photography. Into 4 of these, surveyors have landed. The next step is that historic moment when man first sets foot on the lunar surface.
It will be a launch vehicle like this Saturn V that will one day boost astronauts toward the moon. In this important first flight test on November 9th, all systems worked flawlessly. Separations occurred as programmed. Stages untried in space fired on command. Shown here in animation, the all-important re-entry to duplicate a return trip from the moon. It, too, exceeded its requirements. The spacecraft skipped in and out of the Earth's atmosphere to slow it down, blazing in at nearly 25,000 miles per hour, simulating a lunar return. Finally, a landing in the Pacific within sight of recovery ships. A textbook flight from liftoff to splashdown. Saturn V and its million component parts worked, and worked well. 1967 was an especially busy year for other unmanned space explorers. Biosatellite carried out the first biological research in space under controlled conditions. 13 experiments were chosen to study how various life processes are affected by the space environment. These earthly space travelers included frog eggs, wheat seedlings, wasps, and flower beetles. The main objectives of the mission were to study the effects of weightlessness and radiation upon living organisms. After 2 days in space, the biosatellite capsule re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, was snatched in midair by plane, and rushed to Hawaii to waiting scientists. It was learned from the flight that several types of plants are dependent upon a continuous gravity field. However, most of the data from the various experiments, including those for radiation, are still being studied. 3 observatory-type spacecraft were launched during the year. This is OGO, Orbiting Geophysical Observatory. In addition to giving scientists a better understanding of interplanetary and galactic space, OGO's many experiment hours of data may eventually unlock some of the mysteries of the Earth's environment. 2 spacecraft in the Orbiting Solar Observatory series are studying the sun and its influence on the Earth. The sun is the nearest star to our planet and the only one we can study in detail. Here's an ultraviolet view as never before seen. It indicates solar heat in excess of 1.5 million degrees. Orbiting solar observatories will also serve as watchdogs for future space travelers, enabling those on the ground to advise astronauts of solar activity, warning them when they should come in out of possibly hazardous solar storms. Complementing the observatory satellites, 2 interplanetary monitoring probes, Explorers 34 and 35. They too are part of a solar flare prediction capability to aid the lunar landing program. They are also reporting on the magnetosphere, which protects the Earth from radiation. The reliable Atlas Agena launch vehicle was used this year to launch the second and third in a series of 5 applications technology satellites. The spider-shaped spacecraft are being used to test out experimental systems for improving weather forecasts, radio, television, and communications of all kinds. Up till now, airplanes flying over mid-ocean have been out of radio range for periods of an hour or more. With ATS technology, airlines can keep in touch at all times.
And will you give us your latest ETA for London? Clipper 162, this is Goddard Test Control, over.
Goddard Test Control from Clipper 162. Roger. Loud and clear, a perfect signal.
This conversation between a Pan Am jet pilot and mainland United States took place when the plane was halfway from New York to London. The communication traveled from the ground to the satellite and finally to the airplane. ATS can also relay color TV and multiple telephone calls from around the globe. Color pictures of the Earth show the changing cloud pattern over the world for an entire day, giving weathermen a view in color of developing storms. While the ATS were checking out possible advanced application systems, NASA launched 6 more operational satellites, 3 ESA satellites for the Weather Bureau, and 3 Intelsat spacecraft for the Communications Satellite Corporation. On June 14th, a 540-pound spacecraft called Mariner was launched toward the planet Venus. After traveling through space for nearly 3.5 months and covering a distance of 219 million miles, Mariner 5 flew by Venus.
The eye, a delicate, light-sensitive window to the world. In the dark, everything is hidden. There is nothing but empty blackness. And in total light, the eye is blinded by glaring white. A world of dark and light lies between these two extremes. These beautiful variations of light and dark we call value. In nature, light and dark, or value, occurs in 2 major ways. First, there is light, as from the sun, dazzling and bright at noon, dark at night. Or in between variations, created by light-filtering clouds. And the mellow, rich light of sundown. In addition to light variations, nature varies the dark and light of objects themselves in astonishing ways. So, dark and light variations are found within the object, and also from light falling on objects. Both kinds of dark and light may provide inspiration for artists. Since art is not imitative, man creates freely with darks and lights, which are made up of colors that are dark, medium, and colors that are light. Shapes of light and shapes of dark, as in this imaginative painting. Patterns of light and dark, and textures, which are surface variations in dark and light. And finally, lines that may be both light or dark. Discoveries of dark and light can be made every day. Now let us see how values are created with paint. This is black, the darkest value. And this is white, the lightest value. See what happens when black is added to white. A small amount of black darkens the white. It becomes light gray. More black gives us a darker value of gray. Gradual changes from dark to light can be made by blending black and white. These chalks are arranged from dark to light, step by step, in a value scale. Think of differences in value as notes on a music scale. The more notes, the greater the variety. Value changes can also be made in color. A small amount of white added to orange mixes to a medium value. And more white gives us a pale light value. Many light values can be found in nature. And to darken color, black is added. Here is warm color, varying from light to the darks of shadows. A step-by-step value scale can also be made with color, going from dark to light. In addition to changing the value of any color by mixing, notice that pure colors are in themselves of different values. Yellow is the lightest value. Orange and red are medium values. Green, blue, and purple are dark in value. In art, we learn to mix, select, create light, middle, or dark colors to gain value richness. For inspiration, the artist may turn to the many dark and light variations found in nature. There is beauty in light objects and in dark objects. Darks and lights in the same object are sometimes combined in beautiful ways. They may be abrupt. The dark green head against the sudden light ring creates sharp contrast. Or the changes may be gradual, as in the close values of these pearly gray feathers. Bold contrasting shapes are found in this amusing bird called a puffin. In addition to the dark and light of the object itself, remember there is another kind of dark and light created by the way light falls on surfaces. When light falls on rounded surfaces, gradual changes of light to shadow occur. When light falls on surfaces having abrupt changes in direction, sudden lights and strong shadows are created. Look for shadows, a source of great variety in shapes of dark. Notice how deep folds catch shadow and how rising folds catch the light. In this Flemish painting, we can see great interest in folds of clothing. This print by the 15th century artist Albrecht Dürer shows a loving attention to the effects of light and shadow on hands, the folds of clothing, and the head. When drawing with pencils or crayons, variations in dark and light can be made by differences in pressure. When surfaces are uneven, variations in depth produce shadows. Shallow carving in stone creates delicate shadows, as in this Assyrian bas-relief. Sculpture is the art of shaping forms and surfaces to catch light in different ways. The low portions catch darks. The high portions catch the light. The sculptor plans his work for play of light on varying surfaces. In this Japanese folk art, the artist has created an amusing tiger with value contrasts of black, white, and color. In all the visual arts, we avoid disorder by organizing, selecting, and grouping darks and lights to create our own harmonies. This requires inventing with dark and light. Artists do not copy exactly what they see. They invent after careful observation. No matter how entertaining nature may be, we should imagine and invent to create freer and finer art.